We'll now move to item D to approve the prioritized agenda and proposed time allocations. Are there any discussion that needs to take place on the prioritized agenda?
This is Board Member Coleman, and we do need to go ahead and just a small detail, but change who is actually led the Pledge of Allegiance. It has Catherine Cullen, but it has her as board secretary. But now, since you did it, just needs to be changed.
Okay, good change. Jane, if you could take note of that I gave the pledge.
Yes, I will. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay, Dr. Cleveland, do you recommend approval?
Unmute.
It's okay.
Yes, but it helps if I unmute my microphone.
Thank you.
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the agenda with the change?
I move to approve the agenda with the change. This is a Board Member Scott.
This is Board Member Catherine Cullen. I second.
Okay, thank you. Jane, can you take a roll call vote on this?
I will. Vice President Morgan,
Yes.
Secretary Scott,
Yes.
Board Member Cullen,
Yes.
Board Member Coleman,
Yes.
thank you. President Galbraith,
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jane. Okay, we'll now move on to our public comment. We have received a number of emails. We have received 4 as public comment from Jessica McParlin, Cheryl Daniels, Amelia Vogel, and Loretta Taforo. And each of these letters have been presented to all members of the board and Dr. Cleveland and have been read, and we appreciate you sending them. For those who would like to give public comment, please go to our website, Rio Rancho website, and you will have instruction there on how to give public comment. Thank you. We do not have anything on the consent agenda tonight, so we will move on to our business portion. We have a report. The Board of Education met in a closed executive session on July 20th, 2020 at 4:30 p.m. under Section 10-15-1H7 of the New Mexico Open Meetings Act to discuss pending litigation with legal counsel. The matters discussed in the closed meeting were limited to only those specified in the notice of a separate closed meeting. Okay, we will now move on to business item B. Secretary Scott has recused herself from this vote that we will take. I'll put a motion on the floor to authorize legal counsel to proceed as discussed in the closed session. Is there a second?
There's a Board Member Catherine Cullen. I'll second.
Okay, thank you. Jane, can you take a roll call vote?
I will. Vice President Morgan,
Yes.
Secretary, Board Member Cullen,
Yes.
Board Member Coleman,
Yes.
Madam President Galbraith,
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Okay, I'm tripping all over my words tonight. Hopefully I can get this down by the end. We will now move on to our business item C and have some introductory comments by our school superintendent, Dr. Visu Cleveland. Dr. Cleveland.
Thank you. I do have a PowerPoint so that I can kind of get through this. And so we also have a record of what was being said. And so I will try to work through this as an introductory beginning to our presentations this evening. This is the second part of our reopening roadmap. And tonight we're going to be focusing on 2 areas that merit further discussion. I want to kind of just review the parameters that we went over last time. Public health orders are non-negotiable. They're not something that we can choose to do or not to do. They are stipulated at the state level. When the public ed department issues guidelines, they're about how we can meet those orders different approaches for the how, but it does not give us the latitude to simply say we're not going to follow the order. As of now, and it could change, every New Mexico district is starting on yellow. There's 3 levels. There's yellow, red, and green, and we're starting on yellow, regardless of where our COVID-19 statistics are. And then those changes will be looked at regionally every few weeks and can be reassessed. So yellow is the hybrid model. Red is all virtual, and green is going back to public schools as we have known it in the past. Districts have to have plans. We are to submit those on Friday that would allow any district to move immediately to virtual in case of a rapid increase in the number of COVID-19 cases in your region. All districts do have responsibility for caring for our students or staff who might contract COVID-19, some surveillance in terms of checking to see if we might have anyone who would demonstrate those symptoms, tracing if we have a positive person in our district, and then reporting back to the state should there be a case found. And so it's all completely different than what we've done in the past. So I want to just give you a few updates that we received this week since we met last week. The Department of Health has presented their research findings and some updates on their meeting on the 17th. If you have any interest in seeing that broadcast, it has been maintained on Channel 13's website. So if you didn't have a chance to see Dr. Scrace's presentation, you could see it if you would like to. He talked about topics such as immunity, the status of where we are in vaccines, and the importance of wearing masks. He also presented information about the daily and cumulative tests and cases, and also showed us data about the number of people who are hospitalized and those that are on ventilators. He stressed that this continues to be a very fluid situation with many variables, and as you probably are aware, Bernalillo County has now taken over as the #1 county for cases in the state of New Mexico. The governor is expected to give another presentation this week, latter part of the week. We don't have any idea whether health orders will change based on the current New Mexico statistics. One of the things we were told was that the Department of Health would prioritize schools above everything else and would work directly with school officials. The quote was, every step of the way that we in a presentation was given to superintendents. I think this is an intent, and I think they're working hard to get there. Would have to tell you they're not quite at capacity to do that yet. And districts who have called are still having a difficult time getting the support that they need, but they assure us that that is coming and they are building that capacity. We've also had some updates this week from the public ed department. We have been told that we had to start school in early August, and it had to be in person. We did get an email this week that said that we could have some flexibility if districts wanted it up through Labor Day. But after Labor Day, unless things change again, we must offer in-person classes on that date. And again, if there was a change in the public health order, that could change. They are moving away now from testing large groups of asymptomatic individuals and moving towards a high-level rapid response system. So when someone is demonstrating symptoms, then they move very rapidly, but they are not, they're moving away from the mass testing, feeling that it does not utilize our state's resources in the most effective manner. So therefore, they have made a decision that all school staff will not have to be tested before the start of the school year. And their concern is that it will create a false sense of security, that people will think, well, I've been tested and I'm clear and I'm free, don't have to worry about it. You could be tested on Monday and you could contract the the virus later in the week, and the test will have been for naught. So they're just saying if you have symptoms, you need to go be tested. But they have now moved away from saying that everyone who is in a public school environment should have the test. And so that's where we are. And that's a relief. If you've seen the lines and you see how long it takes for people to get through, imagine if all public school folks were going through that, put a real strain on the system. But more importantly, it doesn't really give us the information that we want to have. I think that that's certainly a more reasonable response. And then the last is, of course, we've heard from the NMAA, and they presented to the superintendents along with the PED personnel. We will have a few sports, as of right now, we will have a few sports in the fall, like cross country, some others where you can easily distance out kids. But most of the fall sports have been moved to the spring. So this is going to be very interesting. It's anticipated if the numbers hold pretty steady or go down, we will have volleyball late fall. And then most of the sports like football, soccer, basketball will move to the spring. And so that's going to be different than anything we have ever had before. But if you're interested in the new schedule, you can go to the NMA website, and they have all of those change dates. I think one of the challenging ones will be track and field, which we've always had such good teams in Rio Rancho, will be running in the middle of June, and it's pretty hot then. So that may not be a wonderful thing for them, but they have tried to avoid overlapping of sports and have certainly shortened the seasons. Again, as I mentioned, if any staff member has symptoms, they are really encouraging them to go and get tested. And the state will be mandating 2 weeks of COVID leave. And this is in addition to their regular sick leave. So there will be 2 weeks, and that leave would be used up. And then you would go to your regular sick leave. Then you would go to FMLA. And then if you didn't have any more, if your district has a sick leave bank, which we do, you could apply to that. So that will be the sequence of how leave will be taken. They also wanted us to remind staff that staff should not travel 14 days before the start of school. But if you do travel within that 14 days out of state, you'll be required to quarantine. So they're asking for people not to travel out of the state of New Mexico. They work in public schools 14 days to when they will meet with students in person. We shared with you last week that we were sending the assurances document, the plan for prioritizing additional instructional time, and the new calendar, a local plan for remote learning. By the end of this next week, we need to submit our reentry plans, and you will be seeing the last of those two presentations in just a couple of minutes. On the budget, just a very brief update, not much new to tell you. We are still waiting for the new unit value. They promised to have it before August the 1st, so we're a couple of weeks still wanting to, we really want to get that number because we really don't know what our budget will be until we receive that number. We know there will be a reduction, but we just simply don't know how much. School districts are all asking the state to hold us harmless this year for operational and transportation funding because the costs are not really going to go down. So, a bus, for example, it doesn't matter whether you how many you carry, the cost is the same because you're going to pay the driver the same, you're going to pay for the fuel, you're going to pay for your maintenance. And so the cost doesn't go down just because you transport fewer children. And the same for, in terms of operating the buildings, it's the same HVAC, it's the same electric bill, same water bill, and general costs just don't go down because you have half the students in the building. Last week, we did send quite a bit of information to staff and to parents and to the general community. Information was sent out through a newsletter. I hope everyone that has an interest will sign on to that newsletter. Because it will be your best source of current information. Will go out every week now until the start of school. There's information about the hybrid and virtual options. There's registration information, and parents only need to register if they're going for the 100% virtual. Students will actually be placed in the hybrid option if they're not registered for 100% virtual. As of right now, the numbers that are coming in, and they continue to come in, we have a significant number of students. K through 12 totals is 1,832 that have opted for a virtual option this first semester. There was also information about Parent University. And if you missed the one last Thursday, it was really well received. So many good responses back. But if you missed it, all is not lost. It's been recorded and you can still see it. And the site is on the screen where you can go back and look at that. It's just an overview of the options, and it was well attended. I think we had about 450 people that were part of that evening event. And we will have another one on Tuesday, which is going to go in much greater depth about virtual, what the options are for virtual. So if you are interested in that, I would encourage you to sign on to Parent University on Tuesday evening. But again, if you missed the last one, go back and take a look at it. There's really good information and a lot of really good questions that came from the community. Last week, we covered 5 presentations, and I'm not going to go over that again. We have all of those completed and presented to the board. We have 2 more to present this evening that are really kind of subgroups of the of 2 of the larger groups. This evening, one of our presentations will be on special services and the other on transportation. Jerry Reeder is our Executive Director of Special Services. He's going to discuss the reentry plan for special education. The special education staff did participate in the Teaching and Learning Task Force, and then they got into a smaller subgroup to discuss the accommodations that will be needed for children with disabilities. And the public ed department has strongly requested school districts to try and prioritize at-risk students when determining our programs and services. But they stress we also must adhere to social distancing and all of the other DOH requirements. Just very quick summary of special services, just to give you an idea of the scope of it in terms of the Rio Rancho Public School District. Students receiving special services are approximately 16% of our total school population. That translates into about 3,000 children out of 17,000 students. We have approximately 245 teachers who work directly with special education learners. We have approximately 120 ancillary providers for students who need support. Those are people like audiologists or speech and language pathologists, those that have that kind of specialized help that enables students to be successful. And then, of course, we deliver our services in different ways. A and B are students with more limited services because they have more limited needs. And C and D level students are those that need significantly more services. And again, that's based on their individual needs and their IEPs. We have 1,000 students that are classified as gifted, which is under special ed in New Mexico. And we have approximately 500 students who are on 504 plans. And 504 plans are not special ed, but they are plans to help students succeed. And then our second presentation will be on transportation. Len Carl is our Executive Director of Transportation, Student Transportation Services. Tana Burgos may also comment on some of this. Not only was she the chair of the larger committee, but of course she oversees nursing services for the district. And then The public ed department has indicated that districts are allowed to place 2 students per seat, but we do have some concerns. We know that's going to be very close, and we hope that we don't have to do that we may not need to do that, but that is what the state allows. It is not 6 feet, and I think it's important that people know that. The larger committee did recommend temperature taking before students got on the bus. And that was a recommendation they thought was important to consider. But I will tell you, as we've looked at it, it's very, very hard to achieve. And there are lots of areas of concern with it. The first, of course, is the areas that we really need to deal with are student safety, driver safety, logistics, and the fact that we do not have attendance on the buses except for those carrying children with disabilities. So there's only 1 person on the bus, and that is a concern. I will share that we have had our drivers communicate back to us their strong concern about student safety. That's their number 1 priority. They do not feel like they should ever leave the seat of the bus. That's not how they're trained. They're trained to stay in that seat and to observe everything going on around the bus. And our drivers have respectfully asked that they not be asked to do that. And in fact are very concerned about the fact that would endanger student safety. The other is driver safety. They are concerned about getting in a situation where they would contract something. We are short on drivers. And if a driver becomes ill, there's no driver to take their place. We have very few backups. And so trying to be as careful as we can because the bench behind our drivers literally is not very deep at all. And then just the whole logistics of it. We looked at the possibility, and Lynn will talk about that a little more, about attendance on the bus, but that's expensive. We have wanted that for a long time. I do think behavior would improve, but even then that could be a problem. If they were taking temperatures and a student was ill, we still couldn't take the student and put them off the bus. And even if you put them off the bus and the attendant stayed with them, you might be waiting an hour for the parent to come back from Kirtland Air Force Base where they're working. The other is if the weather is bad, you're not going to leave a sick child out in the cold or out in the heat or whatever. And then the question arises after that, well, when you get to the next stop, who's going to take the temperature? Because the attendance is back with the child. And so there wouldn't be anyone at the next stop. And so there's just, as we began to look at the logistics, we reached out to other districts. They, I believe, are coming kind of the same conclusion. Very hard to make that happen. If we had attendance, though, we could probably leave the child on the bus. The attendant could get the child to the care room when they get to the school site. But we don't see any other way of the child not riding the bus, just because we cannot put them off at the stop and walk away, leave them even with another adult. So those are just some of the considerations. And attendance would probably have to work 4 hours a day. That would be about the time it would take to get through the whole bus runs in the morning. Obviously, they wouldn't need it in the afternoon. It would not be essential. But the more we've looked into it, the more problematic. It's just hard to do, hard to figure out. Lynn did share with me, and I had heard that Albuquerque and some other districts are just leaving the first couple of rows empty in the buses. Then if a child becomes sick, they sit at the front, don't mix with the other children. And then as soon as they get to the school site, someone would come and get them and take them to the care room. I have had a lot of parents ask me, Cal, how can they help? And there are some things that would help tremendously. If we really need every parent to check their child's temperature before they leave for school each day. At least you would know whether they have a fever or not. If they have a fever, they would need to stay home. It's just so important that sick children don't come to school because we can't let them stay there. In the past, we didn't have this kind of situation. Children could wait in the nurse's office for quite a while. we're not going to have the luxury of it this year. We could have several children that might be ill. And so we would, and not all COVID, we have flu, we have measles, we have other kinds of things. And so they can't stay at school if they have a temperature. They have to go home. So if you'll check before they leave, then that's the easiest, best way that we can have parents help us. We also are really just pleading with our parents to let us know if their child will really ride the bus this year, or if they're planning on using an alternative transportation option. And, in the past, a lot of parents, and I was one of those, that said, I can't take them every day. And so I want to kind of reserve a seat on the bus, but they may not ride every day. We're asking that if you really plan to take your child most of the time, you don't reserve a spot, because we really need that spot. So if you are, though, of course, going to send them regularly on the bus, we would, of course, want to know that. And we need a really accurate count this year. If we can't get all our children on the bus, and we may not be able to, given the numbers, then we probably are going to have to adjust our walk zones and push them back a little bit. Ours are a little closer than the state allows. There's several reasons for why we've done that over time. And of course, if we end up having to do that, which we hope we don't, perhaps there would be some parent volunteers who would be willing to work with the children to the bus stop. And we've also had questions about parent volunteers. At this point, regular volunteering is not permitted. We are not going to be able to bring volunteers into the building at this point. So that's again, is a state directive. Just a couple of more comments about transportation. It drives every decision we've ever made in the school district. And it was a factor in our joining the Yazzie Martinez lawsuit. We don't have enough buses, and we really struggle with a 4-tier transportation system, whereas the vast majority of districts in New Mexico have a 2-tier or a 1-tier. And this going to, during this particular time, it's going to make our job far, far harder than other districts. For example, some are able to just stretch their school day longer and not and avoid the days at the end of the year. We can't do that because we're already starting so early and we go pretty late. And so that's not going to be an option for us. The other is, if you're only going on a hybrid model 2 days a week, we really need kids to get there on time. And we're only going to see them 2 days. And so we don't need buses coming late if we can avoid it. And that's going to be a challenge again, depending on the number of drivers that we have available to drive. The other thing is, I mentioned earlier, if we were, for example, to take temperatures or, anything that will adjust the time that's going to take for tiers, our only option is to start earlier and go later. And our buses are already leaving at 6 in the morning. We're going to have to push that back. And so how early do students have to be out there to catch the bus? And how late, and especially in the winter, do we feel comfortable letting young children get off the bus in the dark? And so this, extending the day is going to be very problematic for us. And as I said, the shortage of drivers continues to be a problem in the state of New Mexico. And so we're now ready. I'm going to turn it over to Jerry, and he's going to do the first presentation. Mr. Reeder will be talking about all of the accommodations, how we're going to meet the needs of our children with disabilities.
President Galbraith, members of the board, Dr. Cleveland. I'm Jerry Reeder. I'm the Executive Director of Special Services. And on the Special Services work groups, which we were, again, a subcommittee of the teaching and learning group, we had 45 participants in that. And of them, one parent was involved in that as well. And I could have easily doubled or tripled that work group. There were many, many teachers that were interested in participating. The work groups that we divided into subgroups, and we had the IEP continuum of services, the ancillary therapy and assessment group, student evaluations, education assistance, Section 504, students assistance team, and professional development. So what is the obligation of schools under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act in transitioning students back to school buildings? Under the IDEA, the schools are responsible for providing a student with a free appropriate public education. During this period of extended school closure and reopening, the FAPE obligations include: 1, reviewing the appropriateness of the individualized education program. In effect, when a change of service delivery model occurs, or when student progress monitoring indicates a lack of progress, and addressing the need for compensatory and/or recovery services if there is a loss of FAPE. Depending on the process adopted by the schools to reopen school buildings, these responsibilities may need to be revised multiple times. If a necessary IEP or 504 services cannot be implemented in the adjusted educational environment, the student's team will need to determine whether services can be provided through alternative means. Or if there is no feasible alternative, the team will consider whether compensatory or recovery services are necessary. So the recommendations by the team are as follows. Due to the requirements by the state of New Mexico, governor's order and/or NMPED social distancing guidance, all preschool programs in the public schools and in community programs will operate in their regular in-school schedule for 2021 school year, unless changes in the public health order necessitate a more restrictive policy. 100% virtual will not be available. All K-12 students with disabilities may select a 100% virtual option. If a family does not select the virtual option, the following applies. A K-5 student with disabilities will attend school Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Wednesday will be remote and will be provided a maximum number of face-to-face instructional days unless otherwise determined by the IEP team. All 6th through 8th grade students with disabilities receiving IEPs in a small group special education settings listed below, but not academic small groups, will attend school Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday.
Hey, Jerry, I'm going to interrupt you just for a second. We're having a hard time hearing you. I don't know if you can get closer to your mic, or I'm not sure. We're hearing you, but it's just kind of going in and out. I'm not sure if there's anything you can do to fix it. If not, we can hear you. It's just a little in and out.
Okay, is this better?
That is better, actually. Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, all 6th through 8th grade students with disabilities receiving IEP services in small group special education settings listed below. It's not academic small group or inclusion will attend school Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday with remote services on Wednesday, and will be provided the maximum number of face-to-face instructional days unless otherwise determined by their IEP team. Those small groups consist of social communication, the social skills cluster, cross-categorical, community-based instruction, medically fragile, site-based behavior programs, and other district programs. At this time, 9th through 12th grade students with disabilities will attend school in person 2 days a week, maximum, to ensure appropriate social distancing and safety. The other days, students will participate virtually. A rubric will be used to determine the educational services provided on the face-to-face days and virtual days. That rubric will be used in tandem with a addendum IEP. Based on the enrollment size of our high schools, it was determined that this would be the safest way to proceed for our students at the start of the school year. It is our goal to increase face-to-face days for our students receiving IEP services in the small groups listed below. It's social communication, social skills cluster, cross-categorical, community-based instruction, medically fragile, site-based behavioral programs, and other district programs. All other 6th through 12th grade students with disabilities receiving minimum to maximum services. That is anything A level, B level, C level, D level, that are really inclusion or small group academic, will attend school in person 2 days a week maximum to ensure appropriate social distancing and safety unless otherwise determined by the IEP. The other days, students will participate remotely or virtually. A rubric in tandem with their IEP addendum will be used to determine the educational services on the face-to-face days and virtual days. So what happens if the school district is mandated move to remote learning based on the state health order? Students with disabilities will move to remote learning and utilize the rubric in tandem with their IEP addendum to meet the individual student needs. How will teachers protect themselves and the students they work with? If there is a potential that the teacher or staff member may be splashed or sprayed by bodily fluids during their work, standard precautions will be used. Personal protective equipment includes a face mask, eye protection, disposable gloves, and a gown. These will all be available to both staff and students. What if the 6 feet social distancing cannot be met? In circumstances in which maintenance of recommended social distancing, that's the 6 feet minimum, is not possible, the following recommendations will be implemented for screening and monitoring protocols. Programs will ensure that there are adequate staff who are prepared and properly trained to accommodate students' health and safety needs in addition to their education. Staff will be prepared to provide hands-on assistance to students with disabilities for any circumstances that would require them to be within 6 feet of any student. To protect themselves, staff who care for students requiring hands-on assistance, such as feeding, washing, dressing, physical prompting, helping students sit at a desk, manipulating academic materials, and prompting students to use communication devices, etc., will wear appropriate protective equipment based on the activity and risk level during all activities requiring direct contact with the child. How will special education EAs be utilized? EAs are an extension of the teacher and will be assigned based on the needs of the students, including supporting ancillary, progress monitoring, and assisting with accommodations and modifications. How will Rio Rancho Public Schools Special Services meet Section 504 requirements? Section 504 continues to have a responsibility to ensure that free appropriate public education is provided to each eligible 504 student, no matter what the environment. That's blended, hybrid, virtual, etc. All 504 requirements will be followed. How will gifted services be provided? Teams will determine the educational needs for students receiving gifted services via the developed rubric and utilizing the IEP addendum. Families can select either hybrid or 100% virtual option. Student evaluations. How should we plan to conduct initial evaluations and reevaluations? Schools will continue with child find activities for children ages 3 through 21 with known or suspected disabilities. This means that evaluation teams will consider the most appropriate ways to conduct evaluations in a manner that is consistent with the current New Mexico Public Education Department guidelines and guidance regarding school services. At least until August 3rd of 2020, schools have been advised that face-to-face in-person interactions with students are not permitted. When schools are open in remote, virtual, and online models, teams are encouraged to continue to conduct evaluations remotely using tools and strategies that minimize face-to-face in-person interactions. When schools are open in hybrid models, students and staff must maintain 6-foot social distancing. When schools are fully reopened, students and staff must maintain social distancing as much as possible and should generally be no closer than 3 feet apart if both people are wearing masks. The distancing requirements poses challenges to some types of formal assessments. So schools are encouraged to continue to use virtual assessment when possible and appropriate. The Rio Rancho Public Schools Special Services Department has developed a systematic and detailed process for tracking student evaluation needs by the school sites. This process allows the department to equitably address evaluation needs throughout the district. The student assistance team has developed a rubric for hybrid and virtual for school teams to use during their referrals. It has tier 2 interventions for blended and virtual school models for elementary, middle, and high school students. And last but not least, the budgetary needs. In order to manage our ancillary therapy, we need $147,000 to purchase a platform from Presence Learning that will help our speech language pathologists, social workers, and motor therapists. The reason we need this platform is we need a dynamic and secure way to do these, do the therapy. And remote student evaluations, we will need $87,000 because we also have a need for dynamic, secure platform due to the restriction of access to facilities for families and students. So as an example, our child find typically brings in hundreds of families, and the families usually come with the students. And these, we're talking, 3 to 5 year olds. So generally, the families are needed in those situations. In addition, the Public Education Department has set forth guidance indicating when schools are open in hybrid model, students and staff must maintain a 6-foot social distancing. It is very difficult to evaluate a student from 6 feet apart. Usually you need to be face to face and you're exchanging manipulatives or pointing to a diagram that the student needs to interpret. So the total budget needs for ancillary therapy and student evaluations is $244,000. And that's all I have. I now stand for questions.
Okay, thank you so much, Jerry. That was a great presentation. We'll just go through the board. I'll start with Board Member Cullen. Would you like to give some comments or questions?
Thank you. This is Board Member Cullen. And I'm sorry you were cutting in and out. So I was trying to kind of capture some notes while I was going through this. So with the Shining Stars for the preschool, it's 100% virtual will not be available. Is that only for the special services groups, or is that for all of them? Because I was confused on that.
That is for all of them. And what I want to mention under the preschool is they're no longer under the Public Education Department. They are now under the Early Childhood Education and Care Department. And so that was their guidance that we provide. They want to see preschool going fully.
Okay, just want to make sure that doesn't. And then with the gifted programs, if they're a 100% virtual option, is Edgenuity going to have any special classes or something for the gifted? So how are we handling that with the gifted with the secondary on 100%?
So the gifted will probably still utilize the Edgenuity platform, but their case manager will still be working with the students of the gifted to ensure that enrichment, that their IEP needs are met.
Okay, I think that's all I have for right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Cullen. Wynn Coleman, Board Member Coleman. You're still muted, Wynn.
I know, it just keeps
There we
dropping. I'd like maybe just kind of a Where I see this as a challenge is when you're dealing with students that might not understand about the distancing or about keeping masks on. And my concern is, I know that we never have enough staff, but how is that going to be addressed?
Oh, sorry. You did kind of cut in that, but I think I got the gist of the question. So really the students in the special programs that we're talking about, they will have both the teacher, the education assistants, and they will try to meet their IEP needs to the fullest. I know that sometimes it's difficult to wrangle students, so to speak, but they will do their best. And we're not sure what our total numbers of face-to-face students will be. It all depends on, I think I heard Dr. Cleveland say already 1,800 have opted for virtual, and I'm not sure how many of those students have disabilities. So that may or may not free up staff.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, Vice President Morgan.
I don't have any questions or concerns. Jerry, very, very good job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate your hard work.
Okay, Secretary Scott.
I don't have any questions for you either. Thank you for a great presentation. And I have my fingers crossed for you for a very challenging first part of the year.
Thank you.
All right, I do have a couple questions. I just have to look through my notes to find them all. Sorry about that. So for Shining Stars, I know later on tonight we're talking about possibly pushing back and doing 100% online until after Labor Day. So how would that affect Shining Stars? Would we be able to leave Shining Stars in since they are not under our public school system, or will they just have to wait to start school until after Labor Day?
I believe, and we will have to probably check on this, but I think if we decided to start after Labor Day, that Shining Stars could start after Labor Day as well. But that is something, let me take a quick note and we will check on that.
Because if we do that, I think the option was just to go 100% online until Labor Day. So we'll still start in August, but I was curious as to what they're going to do. Okay.
So I do know that after or the end of last year, at that age of students, they find it's very difficult for the staff to work with them on a Chromebook or on computers. And so really the staff had to provide other resources for students to use and or do a lesson, and then the students had to watch it. But because the students are so young, it's hard for them to interact on a platform, a computerized platform.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense to me. So one other question, I don't know if you've had a chance to interact with some of the special education teachers. How is the temperament there? Are we having teachers that are feeling comfortable going back in? I don't know how much research has been done there.
So the teachers that I worked with in the work group seemed very excited to go back, but I think with caution. I think just as all of us, they are waiting to see what happens, and I believe they all have their families and their own health to protect as well. So they do want to get back to students, but they want to be careful and they want to maintain their health. And I know that some teachers that may have some health needs, they're submitting the appropriate paperwork so that they can teach virtually to the Human Resources Department.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I think that's my other one was just towards, Catherine was talking about gifted services. And at least for high school, Catherine, I was just looking at their course offerings. And so not necessarily like gifted class, but they do have a lot of AP courses, it looked like, on there for that ingenuity. So I thought just that was good for some of our gifted kids as well. Any other questions from our board members? Dr. Cleveland, and I didn't go to you first, but do you have anything else you would like to add?
The only thing, going back to Board Member Coleman's question, I would just, remind the board that our classes for children with disabilities are much smaller to start with, and we do have assistants in there. So, they have fewer children to begin with, which is a really good thing given where we are right now. So their classes are already much smaller to begin with.
Well, and I guess I have one more question on that, though, just because we're receiving a lot of emails in every which way. But some of the ones I saw come across were just families who are very concerned with their students who are on these sort of plans. Do we have any leeway with them with this hybrid? Are we just planning on keeping them in that hybrid situation, or are we kind of working on some of these families as a case-by-case basis if there's some extreme difficulty there?
Yes, if it's all based on a student's IEP, really. If a student needs more services, we could add those. If we need to reduce or scale back days, we basically do that through an IEP as well. So it's those committees determining the student's needs on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, thank you. And I know you kind of hit on that in there, but I just kind of wanted to go on into it again. So thank you. If there's no other questions, thank you so much for your presentation. We appreciate it. Go ahead.
No, I was this is a question, but this was a kind of response with the gifted, with a lot of AP courses. It's just that gifted follows an IEP.
Yeah.
And so that's why I was with that, and particularly because some don't elect to take AP courses. Mm-hmm. It's just they have AP. That's what I was inquiring about. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Catherine. And and I will say that I do have some kids on gifted IEP that they were really good at checking in with them in the spring to make sure everything was going well. So that was really good. Okay, I totally have lost my my paperwork. Give me 1 second. Here it is. Okay, so on that, we also had Luana was presenting, or are we just moving on to transportation? Okay, I see the slide coming up. So now we're moving on to our staff and student task force on recommendations for transportation. And I believe Tana Burgos will be our presenter.
Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Cleveland, Tana Burgos, Executive Director of Student Services. And this was part of the task force that I oversaw. And as we had said last week, we're going to bring it back for further discussion. So I'm going to have Lynn go ahead and take over with a very short presentation, but discuss a couple slides on what that proposal is.
Good evening, Madam President Galbraith, board members, Dr. Cleveland. Below, I'm going to talk about what we have come up with for transportation, as well as I will go over any hindrances that we found, like Dr. Cleveland had spoken about earlier, regarding taking temperatures on buses. The first portion that I want to talk about is students with disabilities. All of those buses already have an attendant on them. And so they will be given a mask as well as a face shield, and we can take the temperatures of those kiddos as they get on the bus. All of those kiddos are picked up either from home or from a care providers. So if they have a temperature of 100 degrees or more, they would simply go back in the house. We'd hand them off to the parents, whatever need be. So they are already at home when we pick them up. We would also notify the school that student would not be coming in and that they had a temperature of 100 degrees or more. In addition, those buses, for all the kiddos that are on there, we would ventilate the bus as much as possible. We're going to open up every other window. We have roof hatches above that we can open. There will be hand sanitizer that is in the bus that will be secured to the bus so that the students can use a hand sanitizer as they get on the bus, get off the bus. Bus drivers will wear masks. Like I said earlier, the attendants will wear both a face mask and a shield. Each bus will be disinfected after each school. And then the buses will be thoroughly disinfected on Wednesdays. Next slide. The general ed students, what we've come up with is that we could observe those students on the bus as they get on the bus, as I had talked about in another board meeting, that part of that driver's job is to watch those students get on the bus, watch and see what's going on with them. And so they can also make an observation as to their wellness. If a student appears ill, we can seat them up front. We can notify the school. If they're seated up front, they would be across from the driver. The driver can keep an eye on them and see how they're feeling. When they get to the school, the nurse can take that student off the bus and decide from there if they need to take them to the care room and take further care of that student. Again, also on those buses, we ventilate the bus by opening every other window and having the roof hatches open for plenty of ventilation. Sanitizer secured on the bus so they can use that. Bus drivers would wear masks and disinfect the bus after each school, and a thorough disinfection of the buses on Wednesdays. Now, regarding having the general ed drivers take temperatures on the bus, which we have discussed before, it would require for us to hire at least 45 attendants. And of course, in this short of time, hiring that many of attendants would be an issue. They also would need to, they would have to get off the bus to go take the student's temperature as they come on board the bus. The driver is not allowed to get out of their seat. And as we talked before, that is for the safety reasons, as they have lots of things to do when they are at those bus stops and checking for cars passing the bus, things like that. So there's a lot of safety concerns there. There are also concerns about a student has a temperature leaving up at the bus stop. One of my big concerns was for the little kiddos. You know, could you imagine a kindergartner or first grader that has a temperature and had to be off the bus with the attendant? That would be extremely traumatic for them, or if they had siblings on the bus. So that was another big concern of ours. And of course, the cost for having all of those attendants. The cost for the school year would be around $500,000 for the school year, which is about $65,000 a month for having attendants on the bus for the general ed buses to take temperatures. So those are a lot of our obstacles as to why we felt that that would not be a feasible route for us to take, and why we decided to go with this option as far as running the buses and trying to keep an eye on those kiddos to see who's sick and who might need some attention. And I'm open for questions.
Okay, thank you. We'll start. I just have to choose who to start with every time I look at my. Let's go with Vice President Morgan. Would you like to start with any questions or comments on transportation?
This is Board Member Jeff Morgan. I have no questions or comments on student transportation. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
All right. Secretary Scott.
I have no questions or additions. Thank you for a good presentation, Tana.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And Board Member Coleman.
So just through the presentation, I was just curious that if we, will we put all children that appear sick, whether they have a temperature or not, in those first seats?
I'm sorry, I might have missed part of that.
Sorry.
That's
the students that appear sick, if some do not have a temperature, will they kind of be, will they have to sit in the front seat with the students that have a temperature?
think that was part of Dr. Cleveland's remarks on what some other districts are doing. Lynn, if I understand right, we're not planning to do that in ours. Is that correct?
Well, so the general ed buses, they would not be taking temperatures. All they're going to do is observe. And then so once we notify the school, then the school would take their temperature. All we're observe is maybe a kiddo is getting on the bus and is coughing and sneezing, maybe doesn't feel well. We kind of do this already. You know, if you've got a kiddo that comes on and they're feeling like they're going to be sick on the bus or something like that, we generally put them up front so we can keep an eye on them. Do I need to hand you a trash can real quick? Things like that. And so we kind of do that already. So we would not be taking temperatures at all on a general ed bus. It's just an observance. And if it appears they're feeling well, we can ask a couple questions if we need to. Move them up front so we can keep an eye on them and give the school better information when we get to the school.
And
Does that answer the question?
Yes, and while I understand we're trying to juggle all of this, I do want to express that I have a concern about putting children all on a bus and then them riding to school, and if it's determined that one of them has a temperature and the exposure. So I know that it's difficult, but that is a concern that I have, and it's a concern that I would, that any parent whose child is on a bus, that they're determined once they ride that whole entire way to school and get there and find out that another child on the bus has a temperature. I think that's going to really kind of set up for a lot of pushback and a lot of uproar.
I understand. Yes, I agree. Yes.
Anything else, Board Member Coleman? Well, Lynn, would it be possible, I know we're saying we're not going to take any sort of temperature or anything, but for those, you know, when you go into the doctor's office, and they're not always the most accurate, but just the ones that you hold close to the forehead. I'm trying to do things, but no one can see everything. Would that be possible? Because the bus driver would not have to get out of their seat. Would that be a possibility where they would just hold it and the kids would kind of come in and go through? Or do you still feel like that would be really a safety concern for the driver?
That is really a safety concern for me, because that's what we use in the office now, is those kinds you hold up to you, because we all have to have our temperature taken in the office. And so it takes a few seconds for it to register. And so actually, Jane came to our office, Jane Hoagland came to our office, and we did a dry run with staff taking temperatures, getting on a bus. It takes about 10 seconds, maybe 15 seconds per student to take a temperature. Also, for the driver to do that, as I had talked before, my biggest concern is when they're loading on that bus, they have to watch out that mirror and watch for cars to pass. There's kids that come to the bus at the last minute. You're watching to see so you can holler, honk, whatever it is you need to do. Kids line up real close to the bus, so you also have to watch that other mirror to make sure no one's, you know, ducked down under the bus to get a piece of paper or something like that. And so that would be a big safety concern for me, that they are doing that while trying to take temperatures. It would just, I don't think that is a safe practice to do. I would be very, very concerned and strongly against that.
Thank you. That makes sense. And I remember you talking about that a couple of weeks ago. So thanks again for that. Board, go ahead. When?
Yeah, I'm not done. I just, and I do believe that the bus drivers, their focus needs to be on children getting on the bus and getting off the bus, and making sure that they're in the appropriate place to move forward for the bus to start up again. But I need a refresher about the purchase that we made to take temperatures. And I just can't remember off the top of my head what the discussion was about having those for the buses. Can someone speak to that?
Sal, are you available to speak to that? I know they were not purchased for the buses, but Sal, I don't know if you're available if you're on this.
And also too, Lynn, how many?
I can respond to that. I could respond to that. If the and Mike Baker could also respond to that. It is, the decision was to use them at the schools, and we did not have enough to do both. And so they will be used at the schools as students come into the school. I would love to have them at the buses too, but we have so many buses that the cost was quite prohibitive to put one at every bus stop. So that was the background for that. And I would also just add, to support what Lynn has said. I have had a situation in the past with the superintendent of another school district where we had a driver momentarily distracted, literally a split second distraction. And as she turned to look at the children behind her, she lost sight of the child that was right at the door. And the wind came up and it blew the child's papers under the bus. And the child went after the papers and the bus ran over her. And so you think, you cannot, just one split second. The driver was not charged. She was not negligent. She just lost sight of the child. And so there's so much training that goes with bus drivers today to never lose sight of what's going on around them. And anything that even momentarily distracts them can have a very tragic outcome. And so I've seen it firsthand, probably the worst thing I ever saw in my life. And I just, we have to be careful. And the drivers themselves are very worried about it. And I think right now it's real important that we hear from our drivers in terms of how they feel about anything that does take them away from what they perceive to be their job in keeping children safe.
President Galbraith, Dr. Cleveland, Michael Baker, Chief Operations Officer, if I may add to the, we did purchase the tablets for the schools. We did take a hard look at also making that same purchase for the school buses, but we determined that at this time it's really not a logical choice, only because when you have so many kids getting on the bus and the different heights of the kids, your face silhouette has to perfectly align within that small tablet. And we would have to essentially invent a very specific stand and somehow mount that to the inside of the bus. And we believe that device at this time would actually really divert the driver's attention because it would be very difficult to actually get that to work on a school bus. And so for those reasons, and really for those reasons only, we decided not to go in that direction.
Thank you.
Madam President and board members, also, if we had those on the bus, number one, to install a stand, it has to be approved by PED. We can't just install equipment on a bus without approval. But even if we had them do that, part of the issue too, isn't it? A big part of the issue is that, so a kiddo gets on there and they have a temperature. Now what do we do with them? We can't leave them at the stop. So we're kind of in the same position we are now, that we have to transport them. And I know that's a big concern of yours, Board Member Coleman, and I'm sure of everybody's, that we're transporting a kiddo that we know has a fever or doesn't feel well on a bus with all those other kiddos. So taking that temperature at the bus is one thing, but it's also, okay, now what do we do with that little kiddo that we can't leave them at the stop, and how are we going to find the parents and things like that?
Right, and this is Board Member Coleman. So I'm just curious, just in outside conversations, outside of this board meeting, is there a way that you can find a group that could maybe have one attendant per bus that takes the temperature, that maybe stands outside? Because my concern is that I understand about that temperature and what do we do with that student, but they're going to be sitting with our students that are not sick. And so if we can at least identify that and get them in those first couple of seats, and then handle it appropriately when they get to school, the exposure to other students is concerning. And I just wonder if there's a way that we could find some group that could do that.
In other words, find a group that would be at the bus stop to take temperatures. Is that what you're saying?
Almost like a bus attendant.
Uh-huh.
You know, if there's some way that you know, would that be worth doing for the peace of mind and also, you know, just the safety of all of our students that are riding the bus?
I'm sure that is certainly something we can look into. Again, you're saying that they might have a temperature, but we would just seat them up in the front portion of the bus. Is that what
yes,
I'm understanding? Okay.
I mean, that's the plan if they look like they're sick. But if they get on the bus and it's not identified and they're sitting back in the midst of all of the children and exposing everybody to whatever it is, you know, if there was an attendant that was their responsibility to take the temperature, just get everybody on the bus. And then if there was somebody that had a temperature, I mean, they're gonna be quarantined anyway as soon as they get to school. Why not just make sure that we kind of get ahead of the game and before they get into school and
Right.
surrounded by everybody, you know, side,
Right.
front, behind.
Right.
Could
Yes.
I add something to that?
Yeah.
We have just kind of in a broader scope, we have wanted attendance on all of our school buses for a really long time. And the reason we've not had them is it's very cost prohibitive. And we would have to have someone on each bus for 4 hours a day. And so I don't know, Lynn, if you've calculated what would be the cost for that. I think Mike Chavez also, if Mike is on, I think has calculated that. But what we would need is 4 hours a day. That's what it takes from the time the first students are picked up to the end of the first, the morning, I believe. And, but I would add this, I don't know that we can afford that, but I will say that if we had attendance on every bus, that it would certainly help with behavior and it would help with other things. It would be a nice thing to have. It's something we've just never been able to afford, given that our transportation budget runs in the red every single year. But it's, you know, it certainly would be a good thing to have. And yes, they could be temperature takers. That could be one of their jobs, but it wouldn't be the only job they would do. One of the concerns also is keeping the kids in their seats and keeping the distance. And that's going to be a challenge. It is going to be a challenge on a bus because kids are just kids. And so but I did want to just explain the reason we've not done attendance except for our buses with children with disabilities on them is it's just been a cost factor.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Cleveland and board members. As I had mentioned before, the cost to have an attendant on the bus in the mornings to take temperatures would run about $500,000 for the school year, which would be about 65 grand a month. And also when we're talking about having groups be at bus stops, we have almost 18,000 bus stops. And so that is just kind of overwhelming also, you know, if you're thinking about a neighborhood group or something like that, or whatever it might be, just something to think about how many bus stops we would have to take temperatures at and what that means throughout the day.
And I also really think that you would have parents who would not want strangers to take their child's temperature.
And this is board member Coleman. I mean, I don't know the consensus on that. It's just something that I kind of wonder. And like I said, as I have a concern that if my child got on a bus and a child with a temperature wasn't identified until they got to school, I wonder, question the risk and kind of the uproar that might create. So I know this is a hard decision. I mean, I appreciate you tackling all of this, but it's just, you know, something that I have been thinking about. So thank you very much, Lynn.
You're very welcome. I certainly understand.
Yeah, thank you, board member Coleman. That's the thing. It's good for us to get all those things out because we have those questions, so does our community too. So thank you for asking those. Board Member Cullen.
Thank you. This is Board Member Cullen. We've covered this a couple of times. We've talked about face shields, both like in the schools, available to some attendants, and then also to some of the special needs students as well. I was wondering, if they request their own face shields, and this is kind of just covering all the last couple of presentations that we've had, are they going to be issued to the individuals? Or are they going to have to are people going to have to share face shields, like wear them, sanitize them before the next person wears them? Or are they going to be issued individually?
Thank you, Board Member Cullen. And you're talking about the attendants that would have a face shield?
So this is because, well, this is going to be, and I should have asked this earlier too, because this covers the PPE for some of the special needs, as well as the bus attendants, and then people who want them in the schools as well. Teachers that want them and students who want them.
So for the bus attendants, each bus attendant
this might be
would be assigned their own.
Dr. Cleveland too.
I'm sorry, you were cutting out. So for each of the bus attendants, they would be assigned their own shield. They would use that only for themselves the entire time. And if they become ruined or scratched or whatever happens, then of course we would replace it. So each person would be assigned their own face shield. That is for the bus attendants. I'm not sure what they're intending for the special needs teachers, kiddos, things like that.
We have no PPE can be shared. That is a violation of the law, and you cannot share them at all. And so we have enough masks that have been donated by the county, 5 very nice cloth masks per employee. And the county has also donated 1 shield for every employee in the school district. And so we're really grateful to Sandoval County for stepping up and helping with that. And so no one would have to share, but they simply can't share. Children are supposed to, students are supposed to get their own. But we certainly will have them in the schools for those who forget them, or it's just, we'll make sure that we have extras available should anyone need one. I think many parents are very particular about what they want for their child, and will buy the one that they think meets their children's needs the most. We've talked with a couple of parents about that, and there are children who had children with disabilities. They don't want their child view in any way obstructed. They don't want their mouth covered. And so what they want is, that's what they're choosing as a shield, because they just think their child will tolerate it better. But other parents are very strong about wanting a mask because it covers the nose and the mouth and provides a different layer of security. So I think, families will probably decide which one they think best meets the needs of their own individual children. But we will have extras, and we will have extras on the bus. If a child forgets, there's no child that's going to be denied transportation because they forgot their mask. But no child can get on the bus without it. And so that's, or a shield. So the public ed department has said that either one will suffice. You can choose either one, but you must choose one in order to get on a bus and to come into a school. And if you don't want to do that, and you would prefer not to do that, then that's what the virtual option is for. And you certainly have that option if you feel that meets the needs of your family better than the hybrid.
Yeah, because that's the one thing with the face shields. I want to make sure that those specifically the face shields would be like labeled to make sure those people are just using it and nobody else can use it as well. And then with the disinfecting of the buses, and this is actually with any facility. So the EPA has a list for the disinfectants to use against the COVID-19. So I'm assuming that the sanitizer that we're using is one that is approved for against COVID, because I know that they have a list out in the contact time once it's sprayed and how long it takes to kill the virus. I know this
Yes,
is very
Deborah.
specific.
That's okay. This is Lynn Carl, Board Member Cullen. Yes, I believe that the disinfectant that we received from the facilities department, it is the same disinfectant that they're using in the schools. And so after each school, they would be spraying down the bus simply with a spray bottle. That's the most that we can do in between schools. And then on our Wednesdays, when we have a thorough cleaning, it's that same type of disinfectant. And we would go through and thoroughly disinfect the bus with that same disinfectant they're using in the schools.
Okay, and are we having any supply? I know we had supply issues before. Are we seeing any type of supply issues right now with the sanitizer for the schools and the buses?
Not that I'm aware of.
No.
I just recently spoke to Todd Doss, who is in charge of that with the facilities department. And he seemed like he is well stocked in many things now. Dr. Cleveland, do you have some notes on that?
No, I think you covered it. Todd, facilities department has been very diligent in stocking the cleaning supplies we need. And we're, according to Melanie, we're in very good shape. And so we're fine to start the beginning of the year. And I think we have identified pretty solid distributors to be able to maintain that supply throughout the school year, unless something were to change. And, you know, I know everybody gets tired of hearing that everything is, unless everything changes, but everything does change just with great frequency. But we're in good shape there. And I really want to commend the facilities department for being very forward thinking and getting that done.
And the last comment that I have is if we put the kiddos that we think is sick at the front of the bus in the front seats, the problem is that the rest of the students after the pickups go past the front seats and then go to the rest of the bus. So when you're sitting them in towards the front of the bus, there's more likelihood of them getting exposure by being up in the front, I would think. I'm not sure, you know, obviously. But that was my concern with putting them in the front of the bus.
I agree, because I've thought that through. You know, you could use the back of the bus, but there's also the potential that one of the last kiddos that gets on the bus has to walk past all those kiddos going to the back of the bus. That's all I can say. Yeah. My purpose for putting them in the front is because they would be in the seat that is across from the driver instead of right behind them. That way they can look over. Typically when you have kiddos that you need to keep an eye on, they're in those seats over there because you can easily see them as opposed to ones right behind the driver. And so that's why I feel better about the ones up front, so you can keep an eye on them and just see what's going on.
And you would also be able to get them off first before you unload the other children and get them to the nurse's office. Someone could be there to meet them and get them away from the other children right away.
And obviously there's just a no-win situation on this, you know, put them in the front, put them in the back. Yeah, that was what I was thinking too. They get on, they'd be walking all the way back. So, I mean, unfortunately, it's just kind of what it is at this point. Okay, thank you, Lynn.
You're very welcome.
Okay, and I just have one question. First, I'm like seeing the future of all of us just in big bubbles that we walk around in. I think we should all get stock in whatever company does that. One last question. So what is the best way for parents to update their transportation, what they want for transportation? Like I know I registered my kids and I put that one of them was riding the bus. She's looking at a full online now. So Lynn, what would be the best way for us to update that, or for parents in general?
President Galbraith, what we have is we have just last week put on our website what we call an opt-out form. And so on that form, they can go in there and fill that out. And it can tell us, I intend to use the bus. I have no intentions of using the bus. I might use the bus. Even if they want to use a bus once in a blue moon, that's perfectly fine, but we need to know that so we can manage our loads better, because we are currently going through all of our routes to try to manage our loads so that we know what to expect. We also intend to get that sent out to all of our parents via either an email or a messenger, a school messenger, something like that, so they can get that information to us so we can hopefully provide the best service that we can to them and know what to expect when we get to the stops and not come to a stop and we're overloaded.
Okay, perfect. I will make sure that I do that. So I hope our other parents get on and do that. My bus stop is in the middle of nowhere, so you will be interested if we don't go. All right, board members, is there anything else that, any other questions that came up while we were going through everyone else's questions? I'm just kind of watching your cameras. Okay. Dr. Cleveland, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
Yes, just for parents who are deciding that they want to take their children to school, obviously we ask that you leave a little early and you make plans to get there and drop your children off. We don't think the traffic, though, will be much worse than it normally is because we will have 50% of the kids that are not there that day. So it should look about the same, even with increased parent driving. We probably will not have greater traffic jams than we already have, but we always have some. And so, the request is to leave a little early and have plenty of time if you are going to take your children to drop them off and get on to wherever it is you're going. And again, just a real plea for two things. One is to check your child's temperature every day, and that would save everybody, especially the parent, a lot of time. They have to come back. And the other is to please update your information regarding whether you will or will not use bus transportation. And we are going to be flexible, as and Carl has said. If we will try to be as flexible as we possibly can. But in order to do that, we have to have your cooperation and letting us know who will or will not ride the bus. But if we do anticipate if some parents are driving and maybe they don't normally drive, they should be aware that it takes a little time to drive up and drop your kids off and go on. So waiting till the last minute just could be really problematic for a family.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Cleveland. And thank you, Lynn Carl. That was a great presentation. And thank you for answering all of our questions. We appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. Noreen, did I ask you? Did I forget you? Did I just, are we good?
You didn't forget me. I didn't have any questions.
Okay, it's been a long time, so I just want to make sure. Okay, so we'll now move on to item F, the item that's been giving me a lot of anxiety all week. This will be to consider the approval of the superintendent's recommendation to start virtually. Dr. Cleveland will be our presenter on this.
Okay, this will be a relatively short presentation. We have had a lot of requests in the community to start virtually, given the peak right now in the number of COVID cases. And we have checked with other districts. Albuquerque Public Schools is going to start after Labor Day. Las Cruces schools are going to start after Labor Day. It seems to be kind of a trend across our state. There's really two issues, I think, at play. One of them is to see if the technology is working, make sure everything is up and going and everything is working virtually, because we know we'll need that throughout the year. And we also know that if we had a real shift in the number of cases, we could go virtual in a day. So having an opportunity to get really solid in that area. Secondly is to allow the cases of active cases, particularly in our area right now, to decline, hopefully, over the next couple of weeks. And then, just, feeling that it might be in the best interest. We've had several parents that have talked to us about buildings being very warm and the ventilation pieces in August and their preference for starting after Labor Day. And then we have some folks in our district who always wanted to start after Labor Day, never really understood why we start the first week of August in the first place when it's so terribly hot in New Mexico in August. But that is what we have always done, because in the community, there's always been a desire to leave right after Memorial Day. And that's not going to happen this year, no matter what we do. So but that is that we've heard from a lot of folks. There are some that don't agree with that. And I think there's been very few times in our district's history that we have had our community as divided as they are right now over this issue. There is no majority. And so, for any of us to think that everyone thinks like we do, it just isn't the case right now. There's strong difference of opinion about this whole situation. But that being said, it would also, and we certainly have heard a strong request from our staff, our instructional staff, to start after Memorial Day. After Labor Day. So it just seems like for a lot of different reasons, it's probably the better option. And it certainly is, we can do either one, but after talking with the staff across the district and a good number of people in the community, that is the recommendation that we're bringing for the board to discuss this evening.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead. Go ahead, Noreen Scott.
Well, this is Secretary Scott. Point of clarification. You're saying that we would start at the regular calendar, only do it virtually, and then we would go to a split model starting after Labor Day. Am I understanding that correctly?
You are correct, and I apologize. I don't think I made that as clear as I should have. So we started the regular calendar. We would start virtually. We would provide instruction virtually up until the Tuesday following Labor Day, and then we would move to the hybrid, unless there was a change in the health order. Of course, everything is dependent upon that, but that would be the plan.
A second point of clarity: if the state on Wednesday decides we don't start till after Labor Day, which is sounding like what's going to come down the pike, it won't make a difference how we vote today. Is that correct?
That is correct. If there's a public health order that holds back all schools to start, not to start until after Labor Day, then of course we would follow that order. And that is a possibility. I do think that I don't know what the thinking is behind that exactly, because if you start virtually, many of the concerns that people have will be addressed. But definitely if we had a public health order that closed schools until after Labor Day, that's what we would do. I think it would be very important, though, for everyone to realize that should that occur, the state has said that they will not forgive hours this year, and that we will meet all of our instructional hours required by the state of New Mexico. So that will be added on to the end of the year, or we will have to shorten vacations during the year in order to meet those instructional hours. And this past year, they forgave some of those hours. We've been told they don't intend to do that in the 2020-2021 school year.
Dr. Cleveland, my big concern is that so much of the tone of the school year is decided in the first few weeks. And you set the tone and you set the pace for school. And if all of that is done online, how do you feel kids are going to react to that?
This is uncharted territory. And so I can't tell you because we don't have experience with that. But I do think that there are some districts across this country that have already committed to going the whole first semester virtually. And they're very good districts. So we would do our very best to set that tone and to develop those relationships, regardless of which way we are going to go. But I do know that many of the teachers that, way back when we were doing the early planning, were really looking forward to seeing their children the first week and having a personal interaction with them so that they got to know each other. And I know there'll be some disappointment in that. But I think we will make it work no matter which way we go, whichever way the board decides to go.
What is the science in your decision? What is the research saying about kids and their ability to transmit this disease and to get it?
I'm sorry, Noreen, you cut out for just a second.
Well, I'm asking what
Board
the
member,
science.
I'm sorry, board member Noreen Scott.
That's okay. What's the science behind the decision to start a little later? Is there some science, some research, some facts that drive this?
To the best of my understanding, it is the same research that that was proposed when we began to ask people to stay home and avoid going out any more than they absolutely had to. It is to limit the number of interactions that people have in the community, and that we did see after that first effort, we did see our cases in New Mexico drop dramatically for several weeks. But we were kind of short on the science. I think, we've not ever been through this, so there's not a case study to go and look at and say this is going to be the impact. I would share this though. We have run Rio Rancho Cyber for many years. It is a very high performing school, very high level of parent and student satisfaction. And they have been online and virtual for all those years. And so obviously there has to be a way that you develop those relationships and set the tone and move forward. So we do have our cyber experience, and it has been a very, very successful one over many, many years in our district. And I think as we go through this, we're looking to our cyber staff and leadership to kind of help us learn what they did over those years to be so successful in an online environment. And one of the things we know about an online environment is that the teacher is still key. The teacher is still the most important thing. And that teacher and the relationship and rapport they develop with those students is the most important component to their satisfaction with the educational experience. And so our teachers are thinking and planning on how to have that relationships created and developed in an online kind of environment. But this is being done not for instructional reasons, of course. It's being done for other reasons.
Dr. Cleveland, thank you. Again, this is Board Member Noreen Scott, and I appreciate you taking the time to answer my questions.
And I wish I had stronger research and data and answers for you, but I do think cyber gives us some model that we can look at.
Okay, thank you, Secretary Scott. I wanted to give Jerry Reeder just a moment. I think he has some information that will help us from the pre-K maybe standpoint on this. Go ahead.
Yes, and what I want to let you know is I misspoke during my presentation. Shining Stars does have a virtual option if we choose to be virtual up until Labor Day.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. That actually really helps. Okay, let's go to Noreen. Did you have anything else that you wanted to add, or you're good?
I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If there's more later, please just let me know. Jeffrey Morgan.
I'm good. I've been thinking about this all weekend, so I'm good. Very good job. Thank you, Dr. Cleveland.
Okay. Board Member Coleman.
Dr. Cleveland, would you speak to if we are going to go virtual for those first couple of weeks, how much time do you think each teacher needs to really get up to speed? I know that was a challenge in the spring. And how will the teaching or the lessons going to be monitored and evaluated?
Okay. You cut out a lot, so if I'm not answering the question you asked, then you let me know, because I know you didn't get it. I think that, I kind of want to digress a little bit. As I spoke last board meeting, that when we entered into this in the spring, we had no warning at all. I mean, it was just, it came upon us overnight and we had to adjust quickly, and it was very hard. And on top of that, we had two restraints I'm not sure the community was even aware of. One was that we were not to introduce any new content. Well, first, we weren't even supposed to do virtual. And then second, once the decision was made that we could, we were not to introduce any new content. The only thing we were to do with our lessons were review. And so that put a tremendous constraint. And then, to your point, there was no time really to plan our lessons. And so our teachers were up against an incredible challenge. And I'm sometimes kind of sad when I hear people be very critical of that, because I think they worked very hard with the deck that they've been dealt, and it was a tough one. That being said, now we have had an opportunity to plan this summer. We've had teams working. Our teachers are going to be much better prepared in the fall than they were in the spring, and so we know that they're working in teams. They're working with their PLCs. They are trying to figure out how to help and support each other. For example, some are focusing in 1 week perhaps on the English language arts reading, and another group is working on the math, and then they get together and they share that, and it is a collaborative effort. And we've had training and continue to have some training. Tomorrow, Terry Myers has an exceptional professional development opportunity for teachers to use Google Classroom. And we have a good number of folks who've signed up for that. And so we've had an opportunity to do more training. Teachers have had more time to plan. They're working in teams. They're working collaboratively to help develop their lessons. And so I think it will be far better. How will that be monitored? That will be principals' responsibility, and also some of our staff here, our coaches, and some of our district office to be visiting those virtual classrooms, just like you visit a regular classroom in a school in a traditional setting, to be in those classrooms and to see what's going on so that we can do a better job of supporting those teachers and seeing what it is they want and they need to be successful. So school will it'll be a different environment, but it will begin to look more the same in the sense of how we support folks and monitoring what's going on in those classrooms and sharing of resources. And I'm most excited about the sharing of resources, because I've seen some of the work they're doing, and I think it's very, very strong. So there is a plan for assessment, evaluation, monitoring, but the intent, of course, is to help as much as we can support people. And there's one other thing I would like to mention. We talked about today looking at what do we do when we do have teachers out, and looking at least developing a cadre of full-time subs who will do all the training with teachers and will learn how to use Google Classroom or Ingenuity or whatever, and will be permanent in the sense they will be here every day, and they will be people with degrees and hopefully with certifications, and they will be available to step in when we need to have someone step in. And then we have, out of our regular substitute pool, great number of wonderful folks as well. And several of them have, or a good number of them, have indicated that they want the training and they feel very confident they too can step into a classroom and support it. And we have some wonderful substitutes. So working and training our subs, developing a cadre of permanent full-time subs to support that will also help us when we have people who are out. I've been very concerned about how you step in and take over a virtual classroom if you've not had training to do that. So we're working hard to make sure that our regular substitute pool has that opportunity, and then also a cadre of full-time subs that will probably be assigned to individual schools to provide that support when we have an emergency need.
Thank you.
And I don't think
you answered my question.
School, we didn't need a sub, so I think we're safe, in terms of that.
Yes, and thank you, Dr. Cleveland. You did answer both of my questions.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Board Member Coleman. And Board Member Cullen.
Thank you. This is Board Member Cullen. Yes, this community is very divided about this. I mean, I've been on for about 7 years, and this is the biggest division I've seen on any type of subject matter. And some want to go fully traditional, some just want to stay virtual. Some people don't want masks at all, and everybody says, what are we going to do if the kids are not wearing masks? So this has been very difficult. And I know that last week I had mentioned at the school board meeting about starting after Labor Day. That was some of the things that we had heard going on. And I want to thank you, Dr. Cleveland, for talking with me about it on Tuesday of last week as well. My understanding is reading the journal. There was an article last week and that the scientists at Los Alamos National Laboratory are helping New Mexico analyze 4 different scenarios for reopening schools. And my understanding is that report's supposed to come out this week. So that's probably what she'll be speaking about on Wednesday. So we know that once they come out with this, whatever we decide today may completely change because everything's so fluid. But in that, they're going to be looking at 4 main scenarios: distant learning, a hybrid in which students are physically present about half the time, the closing of high schools, but in-person learning for others, and full-time in-person school for everyone with stringent mask requirements. So I know that even with this decision tonight, what we have said every single week is this so fluid, we could change every week when we meet. And so obviously I think that maybe starting after Labor Day is probably the best way to go, and we can work out the kinks that need to be worked out with internet access and everything else going that the teachers need to get acclimated to get using these programs. But I really want to thank you, Dr. Cleveland, and the cabinet and the staff. With everything that you guys are you're shifting as quickly as things are coming out, and it's a lot of work and a lot of time that you're all putting into it. And no matter what way we're going and as things are changing, I have the utmost confidence in this school district that whatever plan people are choosing, I think whether they go hybrid or 100% online, this is to me the best school district in New Mexico, and we deliver results. And so whether we start virtual through August and then people be able to decide hybrid or online later, or if for some reason the state decides to go online for the whole year, if things change and it keeps getting worse, I think that you guys have all worked very hard to come up with really good plans to educate our students this year. And I just want to say how much I appreciate that. And I see a lot of parents are very appreciative of it as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Those are really kind words. And we have a really good team. And I am really grateful for the quality team we have. And you're right. They've worked really, really hard to try to respond to every situation. And it is, I did receive one email that said, "What's taking you so long?" And it's because it does change all the time. And I did speak with their superintendent in Los Alamos, and I was hoping he might have some inside track. He said the models and everything that's going on there, it's kind of like the Manhattan Project all over again. Nobody can get any information about it, including him. And he lives in Los Alamos. But yes, they are expecting that information to come out, but they are guarding it pretty carefully. And we know they're very talented people who work in Los Alamos. So I'm very eager to hear what all of their research has shown and where they think we are in terms of what's in the best interest of our state. So, but thank you. That's very, very gracious, and it is a very good team. They have worked incredibly hard.
Hey,
Go ahead, Jeffrey Morgan.
This board member, Jeff Morgan. A quick question. Did we address the incoming kindergarten students at all? How this is going to impact them? I don't know if I heard you speak on that, Dr. Cleveland.
I'm sorry. Maybe my computer, you cut out. Is anyone else having any trouble?
I'm hearing okay, but yeah, he's just asking about the kindergarten kids and how going virtual. Am I getting this right, Jeff? How going virtual is going to affect them? Go ahead.
Yeah, the incoming kindergarten students.
Well, our kindergarten students will go 4 days a week. All of our students, K through 3, will be going after we get into the actual showing up in person. They will go 4 days a week instead of 2. And the thinking behind that is the fact that in that kindergarten, first and second and third, they are such important developmental years. And feeling that we needed to do our very best to get them there at least 4 full days a week. So we will be doing that, and they will have an opportunity to go to school Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. And that was the rationale behind it, is that it is such an important time in their lives. Up until starting in person, we do have plans for kindergarten, just like we do all the other grades, to start virtually and with some really fun kinds of things for children to do. But I really have to give several people credit. Certainly, Janice Chenault and Joy, for looking at how we might make that work. And we have found a way in our schools to be able to spread out enough that all kindergarten through 3rd grade children will go 4 days a week.
But that's after the September 7th, right?
September. And up till then, we do have virtual classes for our children. They're planned.
Oh, okay, so virtual is planned for the kindergartners starting when, okay, that's what I was asking. Okay.
Right. Right.
Okay. I have, Jeffrey, did you have anything else, or Jeff, did you have, before I start going?
You look like you're ready to go, so you go ahead.
Okay, so this is a no-win, like it's a no-win situation, and we keep saying that, and it truly is. We have parents, we have teachers, we have everyone on both sides of it, and it's a really, really difficult situation. My concern is, well, I have a lot of them, but one concern is, last week we were good to go hybrid, and then because some other districts changed their mind, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but because we had some other districts change their mind, now we're kind of, I feel like we're getting pressured to make these changes. And when I look at those other districts, I look at Albuquerque and I look at I went through each of their zip codes, and you can see the certain areas where they're starting to grow. Los Alamos, I listened to an interview with one of their board members where they said, we honestly didn't have the supplies that we needed. And I'm like, that's a really good reason to go that way. But here in Rio Rancho, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't do this, but here in Rio Rancho, we just have not had the cases that we've had in other places. It's just a different, and I know we're really close to Albuquerque, and so we need to take that into account. My other concern is for some of these teachers who are going to be asked to teach in a virtual way with their kids home, and how difficult that's going to be for them to be working with their children and to be trying to teach. And they've already started setting up things for their families based off of what we talked about last week, and that we change that. And I know that there's a lot of parents who are really concerned, but we have that 100% virtual option already in place. It's good to go for them. And I hope that, I've even been getting things from grandparents, and I wrote someone today, like, we do have a 100% virtual option for you if you're nervous. Dr. Cleveland, you talked a little bit about teachers. Do we have, if we didn't go virtual, and I think that people aren't, I don't know that's going to happen, but if we didn't go virtual, do we have a staff for our children if we did go back to school? Is there enough staff, or is the problem that we don't have enough staff right now to go in? And what do you think is going to change in the next month that's going to make that different?
I wish I had a crystal ball and I could answer that, because I don't know. I think certainly much of the push to wait until after Labor Day is coming from the staff. And one of the things, as I'm sure you do know, 30% of the staff of the Rio Rancho schools live in Albuquerque. So that is a factor for them. And certainly one of the things we are looking at is, what kind of childcare are we going to have to provide now, especially since Albuquerque has decided to go 1 week on, 1 week off. Those staff members who live over there are going to have a different challenge, a different timeline for finding childcare. So part of it is the fact that we have a significant number of staff members who do live in Albuquerque and are in Bernalillo County. And one of the things we are looking at, but we have not finalized, and we'll bring you some information about, and that is what kind of daycare can we provide our teachers and other staff members in order to be able to do their jobs. So that's something that we are looking at as well. I don't know what will change from now to then. Are we fully staffed? We thought we were close to being fully staffed. And what is disconcerting right now is that the resignations are beginning to come in. And we do not have, as of yet, people to fill those jobs. So we are now beginning to look kind of late, looking for people who are still wanting to work in our school district. I think we will find them. As you said, we have a good district, and there are a lot of people who'd like to work in this district. Some, though, have already taken jobs other places, and so they're going to have to decide, what they want to do with that situation. But I do believe staffing is a problem. We're seeing an increase in the number of folks who are turning in their resignations. We also, once we can get everybody registered, then we are able to see how many teachers can work at home permanently through the year, virtual at-home teachers. And we will have to see how that all balances out between those teachers that are needed for in-person and those that would be able to work from home, servicing the children who have chosen a virtual option. And we can't finalize that data until I get all of our registrations in. So we really encourage people to be sure that if you're going to go virtual, that you send us information that you plan to go that. And if your mind is not made up, by all means, please attend the session tomorrow evening at Parent University, because we're going to go into great detail in that, and you would have an opportunity to make an informed decision after you see what the numbers look like. And as I said, we've got a significant number that have indicated they're going to keep their children home at the start of school. But we are, staffing is a challenge, it is an issue. And every resignation we get right now is a hard one, because it's just a hard time to be recruiting. It's another reason why we want to move with this permanent sub cadre, because if those people have degrees and they have certificates and all of that in an emergency situation, we can move them into those classrooms. So, I think having that permanent pool, that idea came from the public ed department. And I think it's a really good one that we need to build a whole different, look at that. In addition, and I really want to make it clear, we want to keep our substitutes. We have great substitutes. We're appreciative for their work. This is to fill a little bit different need this year. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, do you feel like, do you know about how many, I don't know if you could even answer this, about how many children we're going to end up having from these parents that are going to be having to go into daycare? We're going to take away the hybrid option and we're going to put them into a daycare situation. Is it worth it, I guess, to have, to put them in that sort of situation because we don't go into our hybrid option?
I really don't know the answer to that. I think we just don't know. But again, going back, the hybrid model as of right now is what is required of every school district. And so that's not something that we have the option not to do. And the same when we got the permission that went out to school districts that we could do virtual until Labor Day, the directive said, and then after Labor Day, you will offer in-person classes unless it changes again. So I think that's kind of where we are. I don't believe, given, and you've all said it, but I'll say it again, the community is extremely divided between those who don't think we should be going back at all and those who, think hybrid is okay. It's probably the least liked, and yet that's what we're going with. And then those who want to return with no restrictions, a full return. And so we're just divided as a community. We're divided as a state. And talking with colleagues in other parts of the country, we're divided across the country on this issue. It's a really difficult situation. You kind of feel like public schools are kind of the pawn sometimes in terms of where we are. But the going virtual until after Labor Day didn't come because other districts were doing it. It came as a result of requests from our teaching staff to delay it. Part of that was also to get the buildings ready and other safety kinds of things we're still struggling with a little bit, get those things in place. And so it did not come because other districts were doing it, though many have come to the same conclusions that we have. But the request to move until after Labor Day has come from parents and staff members. It has not come from doing it because other districts are doing it. Understanding that there are other parents and staff members who are on the other side of this issue. There is no majority. There is no clear-cut consensus across our community of what the majority of people want. To Board Member Cullen's comment, I don't think I've ever seen this community as divided on an issue as this one.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Cullen, or Dr. Cleveland. I'm just going to merge everyone's names. Noreen Scott, did you have a comment?
Well, I was just going to say, so far, many of the decisions we've made have been made null and void or moot by the state 2 days after we make them. And so I kind of think we ought to wait and hear what the word out of the state is going to be on Wednesday before we even try to make this decision. Because as what I'm hearing, the decision's going to be made for us. Anyhow, that's just my comment.
You may be right.
Is there a way to hold, I know I'm a new board member, so every so often that comes out really well, but is there a way to hold emergency meeting over a decision like something like this? No, I see Catherine saying no. So we would have to wait till the next board meeting.
I don't think that this is board member Catherine Cullen. This I don't think would meet a emergency board meeting. I mean, we do have a board meeting, next weekend, next Monday as well, right?
We do if you want it. I think we've covered a lot of the information, but if I were a betting person, I'm sure we're going to need it on Monday. And yes, we do have a regularly scheduled meeting for Monday.
Right. I mean, yeah, I don't think this wouldn't fit an emergency meeting to decide this after that. I don't think the Attorney General will probably go with that one, but we already have next one. So if you wanted to table it until next week after Wednesday when they talk, that would be an option if that's what you were looking at, Secretary Scott.
Well, I just think that no matter what we vote on, the decision's going to be made later. This was Secretary Scott speaking.
Dr. Cleveland, did you want to add to that?
No, that's fine. I think that what we have are people just wanting to know, and particularly teachers wanting to know if they're coming back in person or if they're coming back virtually. And the sooner we do let them know, the better. We could schedule a meeting, though, later in the week that would meet the criteria of the Open Meetings Act. If you wanted a special board meeting, we could meet Thursday or Friday, and that would still meet. But we're going to meet Monday anyway, so it's just Monday's not that far away. But I do think, particularly, our staff are very eager to know if they're coming back in person or not, because especially our teachers, that will change their lessons for the first several weeks. And so the sooner they know, the better it will be for them.
Board Member Cullen? I just saw you were unmuted, so I decided you had something to say.
This is Board Member Cullen. See, I'm fine going ahead. For me, this is my personal take on it, is to extend it out until after, to do virtual until after Labor Day. And then we do know that the governor can change that, but that at least gives the teachers and students to know that they will be virtually no matter what, starting in August. And so, and things might change. I don't know what she'll say on Wednesday, but at least this will give them some kind of idea of what we're going to be doing in August.
Okay.
Oh, I would just add one other thing. I should have added it earlier, so my apologies. I did talk with Sal Maniaci about the work that has to be done in terms of safety and getting things ready from his department. He said his preference would be to start after Labor Day. And I just wanted you to be aware that that was his recommendation.
That's actually really helpful to me. So thank you for bringing that up. Other board members, does anyone else want a recommendation or helping me to make this decision that you want to give out? Anything else from you guys?
Board Member Catherine Cullen, I would be willing to make a motion on this if nobody else has anything else they want to say.
Anyone else?
This is Board Member Catherine Cullen. I'd like to make a motion that we will be virtual until September 8th.
And this is Board Member.
When I was going to say when the hybrid and virtual models can take place.
And this is Board Member Coleman, and I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Jane, can you take a roll call vote on this, please?
I will. Vice President Morgan,
Yes.
Secretary Scott,
No.
Board Member Cullen,
Yes.
Board Member Coleman,
She's muted.
I think
I-
it's,
No, I just couldn't get it to unmute. Yes.
thank you. President Galbraith,
No.
thank you.
Thank you. Motion carries 3-0. We will start
3-2.
3-2. Sorry. Thank you. I don't even count myself. So the motion carries, and we will, so Rio Rancho Public Schools will be starting September 8th. And we will go virtual starting August 7th. Yes, Jeffrey.
Is that what we were voting on? I thought we were just voting on for right now. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. We voted on it going to a virtual.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay. All right.
You're good. Okay.
I'm thinking about this. Okay.
Okay. So starting, and this got all changed as we all just discussed because of the governor's announcement, but starting August 7th, school will start, and we will be in a virtual model until after Labor Day, which at that point we will go to our hybrid as planned previously. Okay. And I just want to bring up again, and for our board members, we all voted, a lot of us voted different ways. That it truly, we're just having a hard time trying to make the decisions. We're receiving community input and teacher input from many different ways. And I hope that our community can just be really patient with us as we go through this decision. I saw a meme this week when I was on good old Facebook, and it was, I can't remember which actress it was, but it was like sending my kids to school. And it was this face of, no, like sending my kids virtually, no, like, and I think that's how I feel as I have kids in the school system. And I'm not trying to give you guys a full thing, but we all feel that way. I think from day to day, we can't decide what we want. And it really is, it's a hard situation. I too want to thank Dr. Cleveland and all of her staff for everything that you guys have done and planned for. I've been amazed at the way that you guys have been able to change so easily and come up with amazing plans. And I'm really grateful that you guys were talking about all of we have all our sanitizing things that we need. And I'm really grateful that we have all those things. Other board members, I want to give you an opportunity if there's anything else that you guys want to say before we move on.
Yes, I would like to agree with Catherine Cullen's comments about our wonderful staff having really worked all summer long to get the most effective plan they could brought forward. And Dr. Cleveland, I know I've said it before, but I think we're the luckiest school district in the state to have you leading us. So I appreciate everything that you're doing and all the thoughts you're putting into it. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else want to add anything? Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Well, we can move on to our next thing, but thank you. And thank you to our community for listening in as we go through these difficult choices and decisions. And thank you to the staff. Beth, you're here for our next presentation. You're like moving along, President Galbraith. All right. So our next item will be presented by Beth Pendergrass, our Chief Communications Officer, to consider the approval of the professional agreement extension with Balzano Government Relations. Go ahead, Beth.
Good evening, President Galbraith, members of the board, Dr. Cleveland. And I promise I wasn't trying to interrupt. I was just prepared. I was ready to go.
I was just giving you a hard time. You're good.
I'm here this evening to present a possible one-year extension for Balzano Government Relations contract. Last year, we went through the RFP process. And we included board members on that process, and we approved unanimously to move forward with Balzano Government Relations. We did put in the contract options to add year. For 3 years, we could do a one-year option to extend for 3 years. And so we're requesting that we move forward with a one-year option to extend another year and let Chris provide us with government relations services again. We've been very pleased with his service this year. We've got some difficult times coming up with the budget, and his expertise, his understanding of how everything operates up at the state level. He works very hard for us, and given where we are right now with COVID and everything else, it's going to be so difficult to even manage the time that will be involved. And so we really appreciate him. I also included 2 attachments. There's an amendment to the contract. This was a suggestion from Michael Madrid. His payment schedule, the date that we were paying him each month, it would kind of fall on a date that sometimes we were early and sometimes we were late. So we wanted to clean that up to make sure we were always on time with paying Chris. And then I included another copy of the contract, which is the same contract that he had last year. And so I have also Michael Madrid is on as well, I believe, if you guys have further questions, and I'll stand for questions.
Okay, thank you, Beth. Noreen Scott, do you have any questions on this?
I do not. Thank you.
Okay. Jeffrey Morgan?
I do not. Thank you.
Catherine Cullen?
This is Board Member Cullen. I don't have any at this time. Thank you.
And Board Member Wynn Coleman?
Did you hear me?
No,
I don't know.
there you go.
I don't have any questions.
Okay, thank you. And I don't have any questions either, Beth, on the renewal. Dr. Cleveland, did you want to add anything?
No, I just say that I support the recommendation that Beth has brought us.
Okay.
This is Board Member Scott. I will make the motion to approve the extension of the public relations or government relations agreement with Balzano.
This is Board Member Jeffrey Morgan. I second.
Okay, we have a motion by Secretary Scott and a second by Vice President Morgan. Jane, can you take a roll call vote on this?
I will. Vice President Morgan,
Yes.
Secretary Scott,
Yes.
Board Member Cullen,
Yes.
Board Member Coleman,
Yes.
President Galbraith.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, Beth. Okay, unless you guys want to stay on until 10:30 tonight, we have reached the end of our meeting. Dr. Cleveland, before I go into advanced planning, is there anything else that you would like to add?
No, I don't have anything else. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, for advanced planning, July 21st, this is the meeting we keep talking about. We have our parent university on virtual learning and what will it look like. Then on July 27th is our next regular board meeting, which will also be done remotely in this format. And then on July 28th, we have another parent university. What will transportation and food service look like? And I just want to put a plug in for these. I watched the one that they had done last week, and it was very well done and very good. And so thank you for those who put that on last week. And so with that, we are adjourned. Thank you all so much for everything tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.